Okay, so urban forest management. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about tonight. I just want to give folks an overview of our programs. We have several programs that we oversee and we implement. So I'm basically just going to give you a rundown of that, a little overview of each program in Sligo Creek. And obviously, if you have questions about any of those, please let me know at the end, and I'll be glad to talk or to clarify anything. So what I'm going to do is kind of start at what I consider the foundation of our program, which is our tree inventory. So, for us to make decisions about the trees, we have to know what kind of trees we have, what our assets are, how large our trees are, where they are, what kind of species they are. So we've recently finished an inventory of our trees, and these are landscape trees in our parks, like in our developed parks, like Jessup Blair, Woodside Urban Park, Wheaton Regional Park. So these places where there are amenities. We have a landscape inventory of trees. This is not so like with Sligo Creek. We don't have an inventory of the forest within Sligo Creek. These are more the individual landscape trees. But I do want to start here because we just finished our inventory in 2019, and so what we did is we internally went around to each park. We used GIS software and recorded the location, species, the tree diameter, tree height, and other health characteristics about each tree in 375 of our parks around the county. And we've inventoried to date over 26,000 trees in those parks. It's a pretty complete inventory. There are, like I said, these are individual trees. Sometimes we didn't capture forest areas, so it's not 100% inventory of the parks, but it's a pretty significant amount. And so and we're using this inventory to help us make management decisions across our parks. We were previously didn't have this inventory, and it was difficult for us to figure out how we're prioritizing things and to implement programs we wanted to. So we're very happy that we finished this and proud of it. And it's an ongoing project, and we're finding all kinds of different ways that we can use this inventory to help make decisions. And so a couple of things that I want to just highlight what we're using our inventory for.
Excuse me, Colter. Let me ask you a quick question of the clarifying sort.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Are the parks that you inventory these individual specimen trees for, do they include the parks, the neighborhood and local parks within the Sligo main stem parks? Stream Valley units and so forth, because we have a number of neighborhood parks that are contiguous or embedded within Sligo Creek, Dale Drive, for example, Flower Avenue.
Right.
Are those covered in the inventory?
So some of those are. So like some of those parks, like they blend right into the creek forest, like you were saying, but they also have trees that are planted that are landscape trees that are also planted. So basically, if they were landscape trees like Dale Drive Park you mentioned, there's a row of cherry trees that are along the path there. We inventoried all of those trees because those are planted and they weren't a natural forest. So pretty much anything that was planted or is mowed around, you can consider we have done that. So there are some parks up and down, like Dennis Drive or Dennis Avenue Park up there. We've inventoried those trees. I'm trying to think what else, maybe like Colt Terrace. Colt Terrace is up there. There's some trees there we inventoried. So yeah, we did try to hit trees where we planted trees pretty much. So yeah, so it is included. Sure. Did that answer your question? Okay, good. And so basically we're trying to use this inventory to make decisions about some of our landscape trees. And this really came into effect a few years ago when Emerald Ash Borer visited us, and we realized that it was going to be an issue for our trees in our population. And we realized we didn't really know where a lot of ash trees were in our parks. So at that point, we started doing sort of an emergency inventory to locate where these trees were, to try to quantify some of the impacts that this pest was going to have on our ash populations and how that was going to affect our operations and our budget as well. So that kind of spurred it into action as far as saying, hey, we really need a tree inventory to help us manage our tree populations. And so since then, we did complete it, and we are using it for things like invasive pests and diseases. So now, at least we have an indication of where different species are located in our parks and different areas of the county that we can go through our database and search. Hey, if there's another pest that comes up that affects maple trees, we can try to search what parks have maple trees. So we may know, like, what's our maple population or what's our oak population. And we're seeing that, play out now with there's different things happening with the oak trees. You may be aware of that or not. A lot of oak trees are starting to decline, and so we're looking at, we're looking at our inventory to figure out where major, oak populations that we may need to deal with as far as removals or treatments in the future. So invasive pests and diseases are one thing that we're looking at, or we're using our inventory for, to try to help us make decisions in the future. And that plays into also tree diversity, playing off the invasive pests and diseases. As climate change approaches, we realize that's going to affect our tree population as far as species, and it's also and it's going to affect pests and diseases. And so we're using that inventory to help make sure our tree populations are diverse in our landscapes. We've just started this program with tree diversity this year. So we've tried to set some diversity goals for our different management regions in our parks. We have 11 different management regions within our county park system. And so we're trying to set goals for tree diversity for each management region so that we can make sure that we have a diversity of tree species. So when we do have invasive pests or diseases, or we have different, some species don't do as well because of changing climate, we have a tree population there that can be sustainable and resilient over time. So that's pretty exciting to us, like using our data from our inventory to really figure out, hey, what do we need to plant here? What do we need to not plant anymore? And we're just kind of now getting into the analysis of that. But that's something that we hope to incorporate in our tree plantings, for the long term, realizing it's going to be a long-term goal or long-term effort to meet our goals. So tree diversity is another thing that we're using our inventory for. And tree maintenance and work order management, we're also using our inventory to track different treatments that we do to our trees long term, so that we can know what's been done to a certain tree over a long time, so we can look back and have historical records to see what we've done to trees. We haven't done that in the past. We've only started doing that the last couple of years. So we use a GIS software called Tree Keeper, which was made by Davy Resources, and it's an online tree management software. And so we really use that to really for our operations, tracking all the work we do to any tree. And so tree maintenance, we're using our inventory to figure out, do we need to prune trees of a certain size? We can look into our tree inventory and say, hey, we need to go prune all our 4-inch trees in this management region. We know where they are. So we're really trying to use our inventory to make management decisions and figure out how to improve our programs through that. So let's see. So our first program I have here is our hazard tree inspection program. So we get a lot of requests from citizens and staff to look at trees. They have trees in the back of their homes or on parkland they're concerned with. So we respond to a lot of requests. And so we have 2 urban foresters who are dedicated to our hazard tree inspection program. And we kind of have a 2-prong approach. We have a reactive side and a proactive side. So our reactive side of hazard tree inspection is what I just described. We get requests in from citizens and staff. We respond to those requests and make recommendations of what to do to that tree based on our inspections. We also have a proactive side, which is where, based on our tree inventory, we'll look at our different parks and we put the parks on a yearly rotation, like a 1, 3, or 5-year rotation, and we'll go around and inspect each tree in that park proactively just to make sure the population is healthy and there's nothing else that we need to do. There's no hazards that exist. Mainly, the inspection program is for hazards, is what we're looking at, because we get approximately 800 requests a year from citizens and park staff to take a look at trees they're concerned with. And then when we're out there, we see other trees. So we really are inspecting thousands of trees each year. So it's a huge part of what we do, responding to folks and their concerns. And we do, and we also inspect our trails and parkways. So all our paved trails and our parkways, we inspect on an annual basis for hazard trees. So Sligo Creek Trail and Parkway, we inspect that every year. Our urban foresters will walk up and down the trail and the roadway looking for dead, dying, or diseased trees that may need to be removed. And this is only for hazard trees. We don't remove non-hazardous trees. And we have a system that we use to decide which trees are hazardous. So based on the urban forester's experience inspecting trees, and we also categorize trees into high, medium, low priorities to determine which trees need to be removed first, as far as like prioritize them across the county, because otherwise we're just kind of chasing our tail trying to figure out which ones to do. And we really do a thorough job of not trying to remove trees. So that's why we inspect each tree to say, is it a high hazard, or if it's a low hazard, if it's a low risk tree that might fall, but it's not going to hit anything, we're not going to take it down. So, our goal is to keep every tree up that we can, and not use our resources to just be removing trees. So yeah, and I think we do that every year in Sligo, and we've removed a few hundred in the last 4 years or so. Sligo Creek is a forest, so trees die pretty rapidly, just in normal forest succession. And lately, we've seen a decline in oak trees, and that's really kind of bumped up a lot of our removals along the creek and elsewhere throughout the whole parks. So we have a tree maintenance program as well. So once the trees are inspected by our urban foresters, they'll create work requests, and those work requests will come either to our tree crew, or they'll send the work request to our contractors we have working on parks. And so our tree maintenance is split up between our tree crew and our contractors. Our contractors will handle like more large scale removals or technical removals using equipment such as cranes, which we don't have. And our in-house crews will handle everything else. So I think this year we completed like 1,300 hazardous trees for prunings and removals this past year, and they let's see, and so a lot of the most of the work we do is hazard tree removal and pruning. We're trying to get more into doing proactive prunings and not just doing hazard tree removals, realizing that trees have benefits and we need to keep those benefits going. So we have a focus this year of trying to do more preventative prunings, and we're trying to start those type of pruning programs so that we can not just be focused only on hazards, but realizing, hey, we need to start doing some other pruning as well within our parks to keep trees healthy. But yeah, our crews do a great job. They do a whole variety of different work for the parks. Emergency removals. Sligo Creek has a ton of trees that fall across it during the storms. It's probably one of our most hit areas as far as emergency calls across the trail or the parkway. So we're in there, regularly removing trees from the parkway. And as you can see, this is like this picture here in the parkways during a windstorm we had in 2017, where the tree fell. And this is a park police car. They got hit while it was moving in the windstorm, and the car caught on fire. The officer got it out without being hurt at all. But this was on fire, and our crews had to come remove it off the car. But but yeah, so that's just a picture that I show that, trees fall across the parkway a lot. And so that's one of the reasons that we're there trying to inspect the trees to try to minimize this occurrence. So we also have a tree preservation program. So this program is administered by one of our urban foresters. And basically what happens in this program is our urban forester works with our engineers and our maintenance folks to review construction plans that are planned to happen in the parks. So he works with the teams to review design plans of dog parks or installation of new paths or installation of new water lines, any type of project or construction project that might affect trees around it. He'll work with them through the design process to try to minimize impacts to the trees, avoid all possible impacts if possible. If not, impacts can't be avoided. During construction, we'll do different mitigation measures, such as you see here in this picture, where this person's actually air spading this tree here to try to get some to aerate the root zone some, where we could actually cut air trenches and backfill it with compost to try to enhance the soil of that tree. So if trees are impacted by construction, such as fill or dirt is being removed away from the tree or a path is being installed next to it, it's a way to try to mitigate impacts to that tree. So the urban forester will work with them through the design process, and also will be on site during the construction process as well. And there are a lot of projects that happen throughout the parks, from large scale projects to really small ones. And the little small ones sometimes are the most damaging. So we have a good relationship with these folks, and we work on all different types of projects. So it's all across the parks. And I know there's been some recently in Sligo Creek Parkway with the Purple Line, and also, I know it's not in Sligo Creek, but Long Branch as well, redoing the paths and trails there. He's been working with our maintenance folks trying to minimize the tree impacts there. Let's see, green waste recycling. So when all of our trees are removed, so when we remove a tree, we always try to leave the tree in place as much as possible. So whether because we don't want to haul things away off site if we don't need to. The tree has lived in that spot for a long time, so if it has to be removed because it presents a hazard to someone, then we try to leave it on site so they can continue to be on site and contribute to the ecosystem. Whether it's left in a snag or it's on the ground to decompose. So most of the trees we remove, we try to leave there if possible. So when we can't leave them on site, then we bring them to our green waste recycling center, which is at our Pope Farm Nursery, located up in Gaithersburg. And there's a picture of it here. You can see the picture aerial shot of our compost facility. So logs are brought up here. And not only trees that were removed brought up here, also green waste from all over the park system is brought here. So leaves, cuttings, branches, anything that the different regional staff wants to bring up, they do bring up here, and they put in a big pile, and we turn all of this green waste into compost and also wood chips that we can use back into parks. So we will turn it into compost. It can be used at community gardens, or it can be used at our Pope Farm Nursery. Wood chips and mulch can be used for tree planting projects or tree preservation projects, mulching around trees. So they all go back into the parks. And we also have a sawmill, which we've operated for the last 3 years. So instead of grinding all the wood into compost and mulch, we've been using the sawmill to make wood products out of. And that wood products also go back into the park. Generally, we're making wood products such as lumber, which is used for trailer boards, sideboards for our trucks. We're using them for benches for different, like our nature centers or different parks, natural benches. Our urban forester who manages this program has been creative with trying to make different styles of benches to use in our parks. So it's been a creative process and a great way to capture more carbon as well, keeping them in the wood versus grinding them up. So it also has a benefit. It diversifies the products that we're creating, and we're actually having an urban wood sale. I wanted to plug while I'm here on November 13th and 14th. So we have a surplus of some of this wood that we sawn, and we're going to make it available to the public, which is basically slabs, live edge slabs, and other lumber that's kind of unique from what we've cut. And so we're going to offer that to the public and see how folks are interested in that. So I just want to give you a plug there, November 13th and 14th, and there's more on our website as well about that. Um, let's see. So we have an educational portion of our program as well. So we have a few programs that we do throughout the year to help further folks' education in urban forestry, agriculture. As you can see here, we do kids tree climbs. We haven't done as many since COVID, but we did do one during the summer, which is where kids come out and they get to our staff gets to put them up in the tree and they climb the tree and they can kind of see how the climbing arborists experience the work, and it's a good way to get the kids into it and get our profession out there a little bit, because not everyone is aware that you can climb trees for a living. So we try to hit them while they're young and interested, and the kids really love it. So that's something that we love to do. We're trying to do that more to get the kids interested in arboriculture. We also do Arbor Days. So in the past, we've gone to schools and done school events for Arbor Days. With COVID last year, we did a seedling giveaway, two seedling giveaways actually, and a couple of virtual events, which were we couldn't be in person with the kids, but hopefully next year we'll be able to do something more in a group. And then every year we have our Urban Tree Summit, which we partner with Casey Trees to put this on every year. And we just had our past one in September, where we had a few field events as well as some virtual events. So it was very successful. It's the first time we've done things in the field where we've gotten people involved, and we plan to do that in the future. So next year we'll have it probably the same time again in September. So if you're interested in learning about trees and urban forestry issues, please look for that coming out. We'll be hopefully advertising that soon, the date for next year. So, we also do small impromptu events as well throughout the year, presentations and talks as needed to help folks, understand. So, our other urban foresters are giving talks, and we're always looking for ways to reach out to the community about what we're doing in the parks. Let's see. And I wanted to put this in here. This is Pope Farm. So I don't manage Pope Farm. Brian Dahl is the Pope Farm manager. He's great. He's a great job with managing it. But I wanted to talk about the plantings that we do, since as far as our urban forestry programs, planting is a big part of them, and we work with Brian closely to identify species to put into our parks. So I just wanted to put a plug in for Pope Farm. This is our tree nursery that we have in Gaithersburg, 70 acres or so. And you can see the stats here. They grow trees in the nursery of different sizes. They have larger calipers and smaller caliper trees. These trees are planted out into the landscapes of our parks. They also grow containerized trees that are used in reforestation in our natural areas. And we also have they grow native herbaceous plants there, which are also planted in their stormwater projects and other park projects and landscape projects throughout the parks. They actually propagate the plants there and put them out back in the parks. Our green waste recycling facility, which I talked about just a few minutes ago, is also housed here. And so I just want to put a little plug in for that. I can try to, if you have questions about that, I can try to answer some. But like I said, I don't manage the program, but if you do have questions about planting, let me know and I'll try to answer them. If not, I'll find an answer for you. And so that's all I had as far as an overview of our programs. So if y'all have any questions about anything, I'd be happy to answer anything that I can. So yeah, thank you so much.
You want to unshare your screen? We can see each other a little bit better.
Yep. Is that better?
Yeah, that's
good.
Cool. Okay, we didn't put questions in chat, but why don't we? If people want to raise their hands or just go ahead and ask a question, we'll see how it goes.
Colter, I have a question. Colter,
Hey,
I have a question about the follow-up that you do for tree plantings.
Okay.
So I've noticed that in various parks, not necessarily Montgomery County parks, but there have been organizations that have done tree plantings. And it looks like the success rate for those trees is pretty low because there's not a lot of follow-up care for them. You know, obviously in the early years, the trees need more care than in later years. What sort of program do you have? Is it tied to your software program that you had for tracking trees, or how is that handled and maintained?
Yeah, so once the trees are planted from Pope Farm, they have a 2-year maintenance, which is done by our horticulture crew. So I forgot to mention, there's a horticulture crew that basically plant trees and then do 2 years of aftercare, which include watering and any kind of pruning that needs to be done to them. So that's also tracked in our software. So we know what trees go out to the parks. We know that they're on a 2-year cycle. And then after 2-year cycle, they enter into our long-term inventory. But yeah, so there's a 2-year maintenance after the initial planting.
Do you have any idea what your success rate with plantings is?
I don't have the data on that, but just from my visual being out there, I would say it's a high rate because they do give a lot of good aftercare to it. You know, every tree that we put in, we make sure that it's maintained for those 2 years. Like you said, watering in the 2 years gives the tree a huge advantage compared to not doing anything with it. So that's, the time that they put into growing the tree. We want to make sure that it's going to live and not going to just throw them out there. So, but I don't have the actual percentages of how much of the success rate.
Well, in Sligo Creek, they planted some trees just up from Forest Glen Road along the path. And
Forest Glen, okay.
And
okay.
There were like 6 of them. And I think at this point, there's maybe 3 of them left. I don't know. They didn't seem to really care for them. We've tried to take the vines off the cages, but nobody's really cared about them.
Okay. Yeah, I know that. I mean, I know the invasives are a huge problem climbing up on the cages. So, and there is with the Sligo Creek, there's a couple people who do plantings. Like, so there's reforestation plantings, which are more trees in an area. They're usually smaller caliber, and there's the landscape trees, which are generally a little bit larger. So reforestation, I know there's going to be more acceptable dying of trees than in a landscape situation. So, if it's part of a reforestation, it's expected that some of the trees are going to die because it's a forest and you plant them with more trees per acre. So I'm not familiar with those plantings exactly, but I know that a lot of trees in Sligo Creek are part of reforestation. So sometimes they may be thinking, well, some of the trees are going to die, so that's part of reforestation versus our landscape trees, which we wanted to have a higher success rate of trees living because in the forest naturally trees die off as they grow up and start to crowd out. So, but I'm not really familiar exactly with those trees specifically.
I would like to ask a question along the same lines. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned this in the sort of open town hall meeting about extending the paved trail in Long Branch from into the park on the other side of the creek. But one of my concerns is that a few hundred feet below Piney Branch Road and just below Garland Long Branch Neighborhood Park, there's a footbridge over the creek, and Parks planted a lot of trees after the stream was pretty seriously, restored, renovated.
All right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I think WSSC must have been in there. So there were a lot of trees planted. It was very impressive. But the invasives just completely smothered them. And today, as a matter of fact, I was there, and someone in the last couple of weeks came through and did a very serious job of pulling and removing porcelainberry. And the trees were really surprisingly robust, considering they hadn't had any sunlight for a while. But I'm pretty sure that's well beyond 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, what is the maintenance protocol with regard to invasive vines and, beyond the 2 year time frame?
Right. Yeah. So in parks, we have a couple, like I said, we're like, what I manage is more the landscape trees. So there's also reforestation trees. So if there's large plantings like in Sligo or Long Branch, our park planning and stewardship division is probably going to be more involved in that than we are, as far as like plantings and aftercare. So I don't know if like those trees actually get 2 years of aftercare. If it's planted as part, because sometimes there's like WSSC projects, right? So they may plant trees, and that's going to be separate. They're going to be responsible for aftercare. So sometimes that aftercare, when it's done by contractors or for stream projects, may be different than what we're doing for the landscape trees. So it's not always consistent. Sometimes it may vary by the projects. So sometimes those trees may just be planted and then there is no aftercare, but sometimes they may have aftercare. I've seen it vary by projects. So I don't know specifically with those trees what the maintenance agreement was for those trees. Like I said, I've seen some trees that they're just planted and that's it, and they walk away with it, and that happens, right?
So what division or unit within parks did you say does the reforestation planting?
So our park planning and stewardship. So they're the folks who do that. You'll probably work with them on other non-native invasives. So they have the non-native invasive removal program, the Weed Warriors. They do the deer control. They have the wildlife program. They have a forest ecologist, and who are doing more of the monitoring of forest ecology, reforestation areas. So they're dealing with more of the natural areas. Our group is dealing more with the urban areas, landscape areas. Sligo Creek is sort of that it's a mix of natural and urban, so we kind of cross a lot in there. So it's sort of like we'll do some management, they do some management, whereas I know they're focused a lot more on natural areas, best management areas.
And does parks planning and stewardship also survey, say the paved trail, which goes through woodlands?
Right.
Do they survey them for hazardous trees, or is that entirely under your bailiwick?
Yeah, so hazardous trees is entirely up to us. So we go through and look for hazardous trees. So any forested system, so we'll go through and look at that. Yeah, totally by ourselves.
So you don't plant reforestation projects, but you do monitor the trees in existing forests.
Yeah, well, for hazard, if it's within an amenity, so like if it's gonna be next to a trail or road, we will, but we're not gonna go in the forest where there's no like amenities, like just in the middle of the woods and monitor anything. That would be what that division would do. So yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, that helps.
Michael, I've got a question from Anne who doesn't have a mic. And let me just add, I work a lot with WSSC, and my understanding of their tree plantings when they're required to do it is they put in the trees, they stake them, they sometimes put a fence around them, and then that's it. So I think that's more common for WSSC.
Right.
Anne was wondering, she thought perhaps you were saying that the number of trees removed in Sligo Creek this year was more because of the oak issues than maybe previously, and she doesn't remember previously, and I don't either, I don't think, seeing a notice of removal in previous years. Mm-hmm. And she, like I think a lot of people, part of why we're having this program was pretty surprised at the numbers. So that if you could kind of talk to that comparatively, what's going on, and also if there's replanting going to be done for any of those trees.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. We've been doing removals along Sligo Creek as far as along the pathways on trail for the last several years, as far as, well, I would say at least in the last 3, it's been happening for a long time, even before I was here. We've done it more regularly in the last few years. And I think this year we did something different, which was advertising or putting notification signs more frequently along the trail with the number of trees removed. In the past, we've done more on the website, and I think sometimes people aren't looking on the website for projects, right? They don't, whatever, they're not looking for that. So, this year we definitely put more signs out, and I think that caught the attention of people, which I think is good because, we want to. And we also made some maps. We've had some people reach out to us to say, hey, where are these trees? And I tried to get the maps, which I was unsuccessful to do on the website. But we were moving forward. I think this has been good with all the folks who are interested in what's going on, is like, how do we change our public outreach so that people have more information about this going forward? And I think we're going to do that so that, hey, you can even scan it on your phone right there to be like, oh, here's the link, here are all the trees, so that we can do a better job. So I think maybe this year we just did a better job of getting it out to people. Because some people may not even notice we're doing it, if they're not there that day. But yeah, I think what we're doing this year with 87, I definitely think the oaks have definitely contributed. We're seeing that all over the county. Oaks make up, I think, about 30% of our removals. Oak species have this past year, so we've seen an increase in it. I don't know if y'all been to Jessup Blair Park lately, but we've removed, I want to say, probably 12 mature oaks out of that park in the last 2 years, and there's like 4 or 5 others that are dying now, which are probably going to be removed the next year as well. So we're seeing like a lot of major oak decline everywhere, and so yeah, it's definitely bumping our numbers up. I think 87, it's not abnormal though. It's a little bit high, but like last year, I think we removed like 30 something trees, and probably some more because some trees fall down, right? But yeah, so it does fluctuate year to year.
And the
but yeah,
replanting?
so replanting, there's not any. We don't have any plans to replant these trees. Most of these trees are dead or dying, so they're not trees that need to be replaced. They don't need to be replaced, but we're not removing a live tree that's giving a lot of benefits. So, I know Sligo Creek is a pretty tight place as far as planting. We do work with other divisions who are doing projects, because like I said, there's WCC projects, there's other projects that our environmental engineers and our park plan stewardship folks are doing as well. So there are plantings associated with those as well. So plantings in Sligo Creek are pretty tightly coordinated, I would say, so that we're not planting a tree where a project's going to be or whatever. So I feel like for this, we're not doing any plantings for the removals. Yeah.
If I could sort of follow up onto that, there's with deer pressure in the parks. They all have them obviously, but it's certainly a factor in Sligo. So when there aren't very many younger trees growing up, except for like spice bush, because the deer eat them all. Right. So that puts, I think, more pressure. In order to continue to have a forest, you're going to need to plant trees and try to protect them from deer.
Yes.
And then the other, just coming off of what you were saying about diversity of species. I know there's, you've got a balance between what are the species that are likely to live. You stick them in the ground and they'll, tulip trees will do fine or whatever. And then other kinds of species, as you were saying, that you're trying to emphasize tree diversity. But when I talk to parks folks and when they're choosing trees to plant in the parks, they tend to have a palette of like 5 trees. So I'm interested to hear you're talking about diversity, because obviously there are, 209 species of trees that grow in the park, but if we're only replanting 5 or 10, we're not going to end up with 209 species. Right.
And I think that is an interesting question. I think a lot of people will have different viewpoints on what trees should go where. I know even in the parks we have different viewpoints about that. But and I definitely, we just kind of, like I said, the ash really opened our eyes to tree diversity, and we are doing a lot in the landscape. So looking at that, in the forests, we're not directly managing large forests as much. So as far as forest species diversity, we haven't really been involved with that, and I don't know where that stands. But you know, we are seeing a lot of issues with our native species. With the oaks, with the ashes, we saw it. We have other invasive species that are close around our state, that are in our state, that haven't really taken off yet, but could. And climate change coming on, those could be increased. So we don't really know how it's going to affect. So I think native trees in our forests is also something to be concerned about. And I know our park plan stewardship folks are thinking about that. I don't know of any plans, what are being implemented as far as that, but I really do think it's something that we should all be thinking about in the landscape as well as the forest, like what other tree species are going to do here. And Sligo Creek, I think, is a great example of, like, some places are extremely narrow. There is a forest, but you've got pressures on all sides, and you might not, maples. This may not be good to replant all maples. Maybe we need to think about maybe it's not native to Montgomery County, but maybe it's native to Ohio, and it does really well. Like, I've seen, for example, the buckeye, the yellow buckeye, it grows like crazy, right? But like, you kind of think, like, what species can do here, still give us shade, still give some environmental benefits that aren't going to be decimated by deer or pests, or So I think, how do you have to be kind of creative, I think, as far as that. I know in the landscape trees we are doing that. We're trying to figure out, there's also obviously native versus non-native, debate, not a debate, but like how much native, how much non-native goes in, and sometimes we realize that urban areas are not native landscapes. They're human-made landscapes. So sometimes what's been here doesn't always thrive in those landscapes as well. They can, but you need to have a diversity of mixture. So when one species is attacked, you have other species that are there. So I think it still needs some more thought, and that's a good thing. As far as the Sligo Creek, what is being planted there, what should be planted there, with the oaks, we see that a lot. With the oaks now, it's kind of scary. Like, oh, the oaks are so solid and giving us so much benefits, and they're great. But now we're seeing a lot of them decline, and that's scary to think about, because we plant oaks all over the park, and they're great, and they should be planted. But then we're thinking, like, well, maybe we shouldn't plant so many oaks because we're having this huge issue with oaks dying. Is that a long-term trend or not? So I think I think climate change is really helping, or putting these thoughts really quickly into our brains, and making us thinking about it faster than maybe we would have thought about it. So I don't know if that clarifies it, but I don't think it's super clear. But I think it's like something that we are ongoing trying to figure out for sure. But yeah, with the natural areas, I know there has been plant palettes, like what's there, you plant there, but maybe that should be rethought too. And I think it is being thought about now too.
Someone else had a question, I think.
Well, I had not so much a question, but just an observation about this problem with plantings, not necessarily from your group, but when they elevated a bridge between the Long Branch Community Center and the library, they landscaped along before that in the run up to it, and they put cages around trees, and then they were all just consumed by vines. And so what is the point of spending money on this landscaping if it's just going to be thrown away? Going away.
Sure. I think it's a complicated issue, because it's an issue, like, if you have invasive, do you plant at all, or is it just a waste? Or and I think that's I think for different projects are different. Obviously we don't have infinite resources, so I think obviously some things.
Well, I mean, the part of the cost at the beginning, if you're telling somebody to plant something, it has to have some sort of maintenance or some sort of sign saying what's going on and what has to go on to maintain it.
Right.
It wouldn't have been that hard really at the library, I don't think, but.
Right. Yep. Yeah, no, I think the invasives is a very tough question. It's a very tough issue. Like, do you just not plant trees and let it go? I don't directly deal with all the invasive plants, so I don't really have a good answer for you there, because it's not really within my program.
No. Yeah, I just thought I'd mention it for the group.
It's interesting. I don't know if you want to talk about this, but the Weed Warrior program and this. I mean, Sligo has a lot of Weed Warriors, and I know the Weed Warrior program's folks have been looking at trees that are fenced and that are being consumed by vines, and working to possibly remove those fences, but also remove the vines. So that, that's a real priority for us, recognizing that Parks doesn't have the staff to do that kind of weeding.
Yeah, we've removed a bunch of cages. It looks like the cages appear to be a great ladder for the vines, and they seem to be a problem, maybe more of a problem than they solve.
At least later on after the
I mean, for the first couple of years, maybe it's okay, but we were just looking at some this morning that maybe were cages along Sligo Creek near the golf course that were looked like they installed years ago but forgotten.
I think
they're starting to get embedded into the tree trunk.
Isn't it? Yeah. I mean, there are the other kind of cages that wrap, within a few inches of the tree trunk to prevent male deer from marking the trunks. It usually kills them or deforms them pretty terribly. But I've never seen vines climbing up those cages. Maybe they are the way to go. Although obviously, eventually, someone's got to remove them.
Right.
Hey,
Colter,
could I ask a slightly different question? Oh, sorry, Doug. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to ask about the philosophy and practice regarding social trails, or I think what you call people's choice trails. We've seen a lot of interest in parks during the pandemic. A lot of people have started making their own trails from whether it's their street that they live on into the parks or whatever. We've had a big problem with that in Rock Creek and have spent a lot of time dealing with that. And I'm just wondering what you all do, what the practice is, what's the philosophy?
As far as the trees on the trails?
No, the trails themselves.
Oh, the trails.
The social trails, the people's choice trails. Yeah.
Oh, right, making them. I don't know what the thoughts are. We do have a group, one of our in the Park Plan Stewardship who does trail maintenance, and they maintain and build new trails. I don't know that they manage that, and so I don't know how they manage that or what their thoughts are on that. I wouldn't want to speak toward that because I really don't know what their philosophy is or how they manage that. So,
which group is that?
There's a trail maintenance group in our park planning stewardship, and they maintain the trails and plan new trails as well. And it's all like the natural surface trails. So I don't know how they determine when to incorporate a trail or when to leave a people's choice trail out. So I'm not sure how they manage that.
Michael, before you asked another question, I wanted to see if anybody who hasn't asked a question has something to.
Yeah, I have a question. Is Montgomery or is the parks making an effort to reintroduce the American chestnut, the blight-resistant varieties? Is there any effort on that front?
I mean, I'm not involved with it. We used to help out with the group that's zoning up in Rockville, Gaithersburg area, like lending our bucket truck so that they could do their pollination with the trees. But I haven't been doing much with that in the landscape areas. Our park plan stewardship and our forest ecologists, they may be working more on that side to do reintroductions into the forest. But our group has not actively been doing anything with that right now that I'm aware of, which would be great to do. But I haven't been involved in that.
Michael, go ahead. Sorry. Oh, Christine, did you want to ask?
I just have a comment. I just have to get it off my chest, which is on the northeast corner of Evans Parkway, natural, native planting park or whatever, which was beautifully done and so much resources put into it. But the northeast corner is just covered with porcelain berry, just blanketing the trees. And it's just like, it is such for park land like that, is somebody not doing their job? I mean, why invest so much in, in parks like that? Really demonstration, and I think there were special federal funds or something else, to make that happen, and to just see them smothered in that area. And, is there any systematic maintenance in those special? I don't know if they're special, but they're of a type, and it's a shame the water channel that goes underneath, and it's just filled with invasives, and it's just like, like someone else said, we do these things, and then,
Right. Yeah.
that follows, and wasn't there funding for the follow through, or is it not high on someone's priority list, or is it just what's going on?
Well, I know they do have funding during some of those big projects like Evans Parkway to do all kind of different things, and invasives I know are parts of projects like that, construction projects where they'll have to figure out what level of invasive needs to happen for specific projects. So I know that is incorporated sometimes. I don't know specifically about Evans Parkway what the invasive species was there. I do know, because I don't manage that program, but I do know that they have priorities and focuses. And like I said, like Kit said earlier, it's not unlimited resources, so they're prioritizing areas of the county that that's their priority. And I don't know where Evans Parkway falls in that, but I do know the invasive issue is a very difficult one, right? And it needs a lot of resources to follow through a lot of years to actually, if you're going to get things down. A lot of times it's maintaining something versus eradicating something. And so, I agree. I don't know how that falls, but I know it's a very difficult task, and I don't think it's just park staff is able to do that. But I know
I get the point. It's just, I feel like Parks made a commitment, and so to then not, keep that commitment for longer than a couple of years for special let's call it a special park, or whatever it is officially. Right. And can you find out? I know that you don't know, but I feel frustrated. I've mentioned it to a number of people. I don't know the right contacts within parks to ask or to write a letter, et cetera. But how are those priorities determined? And I know that it's not your area and you wouldn't know that, but I feel like the county having invested so much in these sorts of things, and artwork and stone sculptures and so much stuff there, and it's just another few years we'll just be looking at Norway maples and a bunch of dead bushes, and it's just like,
yeah, no, I think it's frustrating. I feel like it's a frustrating issue. To me, it's frustrating. I know too, as well. Just thinking like, oh, it'd be, how come we can't just do this? Maintain it. But I think it is complicated. As far as maintaining them, and I think it would be good. Maybe something that I could give. A kid probably knows the contacts, but I could give. It's probably a good future talk as well, just to hone in on those issues as well, because they're a whole other set of issues as well, that I can't speak to as well, and I wouldn't want to speak to it since it's not my program. But yeah, I know it's frustrating.
If you get a good name for us to contact, either to obviously Mike Riley, but to complain about,
sure,
or to, just to find out more information about, even Evans Parkway specifically, or more generally. What's the policy about how you handle maintenance over time?
Sure.
I guess my point is also that we as Friends of Sligo Creek can be the eyes and the ears, right? Where Parks doesn't have enough staff to know every single corner, or maybe you do. I don't know. It would seem like a big task, but and in these areas, and we have such active weed warriors. But we're just kind of cleaning up after, it's just like,
right.
So it would be helpful to have a dialogue, and for other parks people whose this falls under their area of responsibility, to view us as a resource and where we could funnel some information and actually say, certain areas were highly invested in, 5 years ago, and look what's happening. And
Right.
FYI, and we're attempting to be helpful, but want to see continuing commitment before maybe planting, whatever else.
Right. We're investing.
I don't want to belabor the point, but a name would be really helpful, and a communication by you to them that there was some concern about that kind of thing, and we'd appreciate some.
Sure, definitely. Would that be helpful? I can get the contacts. Would it be helpful to get that to you, Kit, to distribute, or?
Sure, I can distribute it.
Okay, sure, yeah,
That'd
definitely. I can send it out for you. Sure.
Okay. I have one quick question. I think Michael has maybe more, but I'm a little broken record on this too. It was my understanding that Parks has sort of changed its position or changed its policy so that where possible, trees are left as snags when they're cut. A dead tree will be left, 20 feet up or wherever the branches diverge. If that's not considered to be, like with an ash, with emerald ash borer, you can't do that. But but with most oaks or whatever, you can do that, and you end up with bird habitat for years and years. So is it policy now that where possible you leave a snag, or is it just kind of at the whim of whoever's doing the cutting?
So snags. So we don't really have anything that's set for snags versus lying on the ground. We usually don't specify that, except for we'll say, we do a work order. So we'll say, leave the wood on site. So we kind of leave it up to interpretation of the crew, because it could be different scenarios where it's safe. They have to fell the whole tree because they can't climb it or they can't get equipment to it. So the only way to get it down is to fell it. But, leaving a snag, if they're like, hey, we try not to leave a snag if it could potentially fall on the trail. So like for the trail, if there's a tree next to the trail, we're not going to leave a snag because, in 10 years, it may fall again on the trail. So we cut it, there. But if it's back, 30 feet from the trail and it's a 100-foot tall tree, yeah, we could leave a 20-foot tall snag in there. And a lot of times we would do that too, because it's less work for the crew. So it's not always specified. So it's either, if it's easy for the crew to do, they'll leave it up. And a lot of times, if it is easier, it's just less cutting you have to do. So they would do that. But if it can be left, they would do that. But we don't specify whether it stays or not, unless we specifically want something to stay. Like, hey, I want to leave this snag because we done that. We did it actually just at Blair Park, where we're moving the oaks. We left specifications to leave like 15-foot tall snags because there was residents there who wanted snags. We're like, okay, we'll leave snags. And we specified that, and they're not going to fall anytime soon. It'll be like years and years and years and years before they fall. So we could leave more snags, but we don't specify that, like leave this many snags per acre or whatever. It's like a creek. There's tons of dead ashes like scattered everywhere that that I've seen. So there are like existing snags sort of all throughout the forest. So we don't specify a snag specifically overleaving it in the woods unless it's something we identify. Hey, we want a snag here. So yeah,
it seems to me that it might not be a bad idea to kind of switch that around and say that if you can leave a snag, do, rather than just kind of a happenstance, just because of their value. If it's not a risk to life and limb, and they can get to it, it seems like that should be the policy. Should be that instead of sort of the reverse is what you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah, and we can I feel like we haven't had a strong opinion either way on that. So having input from you all, I think that's great. We can start saying, hey, it's Sligo Creek, let's start paying attention to this more. Let's leave them when we can, So yeah, I think that's good. And I know there's like a wildlife management and, that there's different snags per acre and things like that, which I'm not really aware of. But, when we did the ash removal, so I remember on Beach Drive, we did leave a lot of snags because it's easier. They just, they would cut it halfway through so they could get a aerial lift to it, cut half the tree down and that's the only cut they had to make. So it is easier and less laborious for the workers as well. So yeah, I'll put that down as something to look into as far as being like, hey, where can we leave it more?
It seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah.
Given the pressure on woodpeckers and so many things that rely on dead trees to live off of.
Yeah, totally.
It's not, I didn't invent this.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think that is something like I do believe in leaving dead trees. I mean, where we can, even in our more developed parks, because a lot of times those places have no dead wood because nobody wants any dead wood in them because they're afraid it's going to fall or hurt someone. And so if we can leave something that's going to be standing forever and it's not going to fall, we've been trying to do that more. And I think that's a good thing to do, because there's not a lot of dead wood in those habitats, and dead wood is very beneficial. So,
yep.
Well, question: do you have a map of the 87 that you're taking down? Trees that you're taking down?
I do. I do have a map of them, and I was gonna put them. I'm trying to get them on the website, but they're not on the website yet. But I'm gonna try to get them on there. But they're.
If you get it, you could share it with me, and I can put it up on the listserv. And Michael, Michael can, if he writes an article about this, he can put it on.
Okay. Yeah, I can. I have a PDF copy. I could email that to you. So, yeah, I'd be glad to do it. They have started down Sligo Creek. They started already, so they are kind of like probably midway through by now. They'll actually be shutting the parkway down soon to do some work around it. Yeah, on 28th. Yep, totally.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, let me email. I can email you that if I can put it there. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Make a note.
Well, at this point, my questions will basically reiterate and support what two others have said already. For Kit about the snags, I saw a thoroughly dead tree and gray, silver, petrified almost, with the green marker on it, and there were so many woodpecker or flying squirrel holes at the top of that thing. I thought,
yeah.
I agree with Kit. The default should be to leave it up only if, there's a clear and present danger and the thing is on its. Because sometimes these old trees are less likely to fall because they have no hardly any branches, no leaves. Right. There's nothing, for the wind to work with.
Right. Yeah, totally. You're totally right. They'll stand forever.
Then, in terms of what Christine was saying earlier. It occurred. Well, one thing we've mentioned to parks a number of times, but without much follow up or pushing, is that there are many areas we'd like them to mow less, and convert to meadows, or mow only once a year, and let them be meadows the rest of the time. The mowing, would keep the invasives under control, and they're doing that on a really nice new meadow between Dennis and University.
Okay.
They're doing it in a very labor intensive way, which I don't think is totally necessary. I mean, it's really nice. I mean, it's like Cadillac Meadow.
Oh, yeah.
But there are many other areas that could really benefit just from, and the point is, if, of course, the maintenance department does not want to lose staff for doing less mowing, and retraining the staff that's doing less mowing into invasives management in some way or other. I mean, that to me is, and listening to Christine makes me realize, that some of this neglect of vines leads what looks like a very promising landscape, like Evans Parkway Park, like Long Branch Community Center. By the time the vines cover it up, it looks neglected, and that sort of brings to mind. Probably people on the call are familiar with the broken windows theory of crime prevention. And it's been shown that if landlords are required to repair windows and to keep their buildings up, that crime actually goes down when things look cared for. And with these invasives, and I thank Christine for sort of inspiring this image for me, when you get these neglected plantings, whether it's park-like or whether it's reforestation or whatever, and then it looks completely neglected. I wonder if there's a environmental justice issue at work that should put some teeth behind it to make it look good. Yeah, and then the sort of last thing on hazardous trees, while you were talking, I was realizing that most of the trees that I see blown down, they seem to be healthy, and it's the fact that the root systems are so shallow, and the soil is waterlogged, and then a high wind event, and I don't know. Of course, I don't want more trees cut down, but I just wonder if our way of measuring hazard, looks at one area of hazard, but wow, the kind of trees that come down in these high wind events, it's sobering to see how shallow their root systems are. Extremely wide, but extremely shallow. And
yeah, well, we definitely see most of the failures that, not most, but a lot of the failures that happen in Sligo Creek that I've seen are from the steep slopes, when you get down below Piney Branch, or even like between Wayne and Piney Branch. There's steep slopes there, and a lot of times they come off those steep slopes when they're leaning out this way, and they have a lot of weight on them on the hill. A lot of rain comes, and you're right, when they're like that, they tend to, especially if there's an issue with the root systems, they're coming over. So they do see a lot of life failures. I agree. I see that as well. It definitely happens everywhere. And so we try to get rid of the ones that we like, the dead trees, or trees that we just can't say they're going to stand up or not stand up. And so that's what we try to do. But we also get trees that have defects as well. So it's not just dead trees. They could be trees that are leaning and they have decay in the roots, and we're like, this tree could go pretty much at any time. And so we're looking at that as well. So not all trees are dead. I mean, most of them are or dying, but they also could have defects as well that are experienced that say, hey, the root plate is lifting up out of the ground. We need to get rid of this one before it does fall. But we can't see every single tree. Obviously, if things happen below ground, it's like we can't see it. So, I agree.
Anna asks, to sort of the follow up on Michael, whether it's too late to keep that snag as a snag, the tree that Michael identified as being full of woodpecker holes. And I don't know if you could, Michael, describe that, where it is.
It's between Dennis. I think it's between Forest Glen and University, but I think it's between Dennis and University. But honestly, it'd be tough for me to nail down. I took pictures of it, but
okay,
I could send you those pictures.
Yeah, you can let me know. I don't know where it is or where they are exactly in if they've done that section yet or not. So I could check that to see. But if you send me the location, I could take a look. See what it looks like for sure. Yeah.
If you could ask them to err on the side of wildlife, that would be. Wonderful.
Yeah. No, and wildlife is definitely something that we look at when we look at hazards. We've had trainings from our wildlife folks about the use of trees that wildlife use, especially like migratory birds and nests. And we actually there's a tree we worked with our park planning and stewardship folks this year. Actually, it was a dead tree leaning toward a house behind someone's house. It was on parkland. We were going to take it down. There's a red-tailed hawk's nest that was in that dead tree, and we recognized it through the training they gave us, and we called them out, and we worked with them and our contractor, and we actually relocated that nest, and then we got rid of the dead tree and built the nest in a different tree, and we pulled the baby birds down. They were moved to the next tree and put back in the nest, and they fledged out, and so it was a really cool project. So we try to recognize that there is value in the wildlife, and not just the hazard takes over everything. So we do try to keep that in our mind. So that was a cool story, to do that. So I agree totally that dead trees have a lot of value.
Hey, on that subject, do you avoid cutting down hazardous trees during the bird nesting season?
So no, we do it all year round, but we are aware that if we see nests, hawks' nests are very easy to see. We can see those. And so, but sometimes smaller birds, we don't always notice that, but we do it in pretty much any time, any season. We do encounter things in the trees. Obviously, animals use dead trees all the time for everything. So, but yeah, we do it all year round.
So I thought there were really strict regulations about certain kinds of mowing, culling, maintenance that actually can't be done. Maybe it's a state by state thing between, mid-April and mid-August for that reason.
That's true in the creek. There, you can't do creek work during sort of the fish mating hatching period, which I think is March to July or something. But I guess there isn't a similar thing in for trees.
Well, I think they have something called, I think it's called the Forest Interior Dwelling Species. So I know they do have some limitations on like clearing forests. Like if you're going to clear a bunch of trees like they did in Long Branch for the Purple Line, I think, they do have state regulations where you can't clear during the certain times of the year, which I think is in the summertime, so that birds can have, baby birds, and then they can grow, versus like cutting it down right in the middle of a mating season or when the babies are in the nest. So they do have restrictions on that, and I don't know how that's applied, but I've seen that applied in different projects. There are restrictions on clearing within certain times. So I think that is more tied with forest conservation law, I think, is tied in with that. Not because we usually just do individual trees, so we're not clearing like swaths of trees. It's usually like one tree here, one tree there. So it's not a huge forest impact.
Muted. Very nice. We're at 8:30. I don't know. I think we were about there in terms of questions, unless somebody wants to ask a last question. But I did want to say again, thank you, Colter, for sticking around at presenting us, what a Parks program is and getting into some good detail and listening to us and hearing us, and we appreciate it. And
totally, I enjoyed it.
Certainly, get you one of these. One of a kind. Oh no, there's actually 100 or two.
Totally.
For Sligo Creek mugs.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm always on the park in the trail, so if you want to meet somewhere, drop it off.
We can do it. We'll do it.
Sounds good.
We'll do a handoff.
Yeah, totally. It sounds
it's
good.
Like anyway.
Yeah, cool. No, thank you all very much for inviting me. I really enjoyed the conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thanks again.
Yeah.
Thank you all for participating.